For 13 seasons, Dave Carraro was one of the most recognizable captains on Wicked Tuna. He was a 5-time champion, a fierce competitor, and a man who seemed almost impossible to beat. Then, suddenly, the cameras stopped rolling. For viewers, it felt like Carraro had simply vanished. But did he really disappear? Or did something else happen behind the scenes that changed everything? The strange part is that Dave Carraro's story didn't begin with television. Long before National Geographic ever found him, he was already living the life that would eventually make him famous. His home base was Gloucester, Massachusetts, one of New England's oldest fishing ports. And his obsession was one of the most valuable and difficult fish in the Atlantic, giant bluefin tuna. By 2014, Carraro could already point to an incredible season in 2011. He had landed 52 giant tuna, including 8 that weighed more than 1,000 pounds. His biggest fish was estimated at just under 1,200 pounds. It was so massive that Carraro later remembered having trouble even getting a rope around its tail. But fishing wasn't his only career. Surprisingly, Carraro was also deeply involved in commercial aviation. He became a captain and instructor pilot. Those two worlds may sound completely different, but Carraro saw a connection between them. Both demanded preparation, discipline, and the ability to deal with risk. Before leaving Gloucester, he would carefully check the marine conditions because the Atlantic could turn dangerous in a matter of hours. On one documented fishing trip, Carraro and his crew worked through a day that stretched deep into the night. They eventually returned to shore after roughly 22 hours, only to prepare to head back out again a few hours later. Carraro once summed up the fishing business with a simple line: "A million things can go wrong, but only one thing can go right." And that raises an obvious question. If he was so successful for so long, what finally went wrong? At that point, Carraro was already building a serious fishing operation around his boat, Tuna. By 2015, the business had grown enough for him to commission a larger 44-foot Calvin Beale vessel powered by a 1,000-horsepower Caterpillar marine engine. This wasn't some television prop built for a reality show. The bigger boat served a real purpose. Carraro was running a charter operation that averaged around 100 trips between April and the third week of July. He was also willing to use technology when it gave him an advantage. On one trip roughly 180 miles from Gloucester, there was no cell service available. His crew used a satellite phone to contact another fishing boat that was catching tuna. Carraro was never shy about his competitive nature. In a 2013 interview, he explained that tuna fishing rewarded ambition. If another boat caught one fish, he wanted 2. If somebody landed an 800-pound tuna, he wanted a 900-pounder. Then, around 2011, something happened that would change his life completely. The cameras arrived. The idea for Wicked Tuna began with a production company looking for a way to turn commercial tuna fishing into television. Producers came to Gloucester, filmed Carraro and several other boats, and put together a pilot. National Geographic eventually picked up the series, and Carraro became one of the captains chosen for the cast. But he hadn't gone looking for fame. Television had simply found the fishing business he was already running. And almost immediately, Carraro became the captain everyone loved to hate. When Wicked Tuna premiered in 2012, Tuna won the first season, bringing in a documented $85,950 in fish sales. Carraro now had something more dangerous than a giant bluefin on his line, an audience watching every rivalry, every mistake, and every victory. His attitude made him perfect for reality television. In a 2013 interview, Carraro explained his success in brutally simple terms. Nobody likes a winner. The more fish he caught, the more resentment he believed he created. And television had exactly what it needed, a captain who was genuinely competitive, openly confident, and seemingly determined to beat everyone around him. But here's where the story gets more complicated. One of Carraro's biggest rivals had once been his own first mate. Paul Hébert had worked aboard Tuna and had been Carraro's friend for years. Carraro was even one of the people who helped bring Hebert into the wicked tuna world. Yet eventually, Carraro encouraged him to get his own boat and become a captain. Hebert agreed that it was the right move. And then the former first mate became one of Carraro's biggest competitors. Television could easily make that sound like a bitter personal betrayal. But the real story was much less simple. When Tropical Storm Irene destroyed Hebert's home in Vermont, Carraro allowed his former first mate to stay at his house until he could get back on his feet. Even after their professional relationship became competitive, Hebert still described Carraro as his best friend. That detail tells us something important about the world behind wicked tuna. Two people could be friends one day, business partners the next, and fierce competitors after that. Those relationships didn't always fit neatly into the hero versus villain story that television likes to create. Once Hebert became captain of the Wicked Pissa, everything changed. He had his own boat, his own crew, and his own chance to beat the man he had once worked for. Carraro also developed a recurring rivalry with Tyler McLaughlin of Pinwheel. Their conflict became one of the show's familiar storylines, and by 2015, an entire episode centered on their renewed competition. Yet away from the cameras, things could look completely different. A TV Guide reporter who spent time with the captains in Gloucester saw Carraro and his supposed rivals laughing together over dinner. Carraro explained the contradiction himself. They could joke around and have a beer, but once they got on the water, things changed. And that competition was very real. Carraro wasn't simply playing a character when it came to winning. He won the first season in 2012 with $85,950 in fish sales. He won again in 2014, bringing in $126,403. Then he won in 2016 with $104,785. He took another championship in 2017 with $98,580. And in 2019, he won again with $120,318. 5 championships in 8 seasons made Carraro the most successful captain in the original run of Wicked Tuna. But was the arrogant captain viewers saw on television really Dave Carraro? The answer is both yes and no. Carraro's competitive personality clearly existed before the show. He had already been chasing bigger fish and trying to outperform other captains for years. But Wicked Tuna was still television. The captains became recognizable characters, and the format depended on rivalry, pressure, and conflict. The situations weren't simply scripted lines handed to the captains. But television naturally highlighted the moments that created drama. Carraro really was competitive. He really did want to win. He could really be blunt. Yet the man who could sit down and laugh with his rivals over dinner was also real. So the villain viewers saw wasn't completely fake. He just wasn't the whole person. And then the people behind the show began disappearing. Wicked Tuna made fishing look like a competition between personalities. Captains battled for fish, crews fought against exhaustion, and every catch could change the standings. But underneath all of that was a dangerous profession. These were commercial fishermen working around Gloucester and the North Atlantic. The risks weren't created by television. In 2018, one of the show's familiar faces died unexpectedly. Nicholas Duffy Fudge was only 28 years old. He was the first mate aboard Tyler McLaughlin's Pinwheel and had also appeared on Wicked Tuna, Outer Banks. Fudge had started tuna fishing as a child alongside his father and grandfather. National Geographic and the production company confirmed his death, but there was an important detail that remained unknown. No official cause of death was publicly released. That uncertainty led to years of speculation online. Some people suggested decompression sickness. Others connected his death to unrelated details from his past. But contemporary reports from outlets including CNN and the Associated Press repeatedly stated that his cause of death had not been released. Later reporting indicated that the medical examiner was still waiting for additional studies. So the responsible conclusion is also the simplest one. Duffy Fudge died unexpectedly at 28, and the publicly established record does not explain why. National Geographic later paid tribute to him on the program, including a moment of silence. His obituary remembered him for his adventurous spirit, fearlessness, humor, and love of the outdoors. Then, 6 years later, another Wicked Tuna personality died in circumstances that once again showed how dangerous the profession could be. Captain Charlie Griffin, who appeared on Wicked Tuna, Outer Banks, died on March 4, 2024, following a boating accident near North Carolina's Outer Banks. Griffin was 65. He had been traveling aboard a vessel from Virginia Beach toward the Wanchese area when the Coast Guard received a report that the boat was overdue. The vessel was eventually found near Oregon Inlet. Griffin and his dog, Layla, were found dead. Another person aboard, Chad Dunn, was initially missing as the search continued. National Geographic and Pilgrim Media Group made an important point: Griffin's death followed a shipwreck unrelated to the television series. He wasn't killed while filming Wicked Tuna, and there was no evidence connecting the production to the accident. Then there was Paul Hebert, whose story took an entirely different turn. The former first mate who had once been Carraro's friend eventually pleaded guilty in federal court to Social Security and Medicaid fraud. Prosecutors said Hebert had made false statements about his ability to work and failed to report income while receiving benefits. He received 4 years of probation, a $5,000 fine, and was ordered to repay $53,660. And this distinction matters because rumors about Dave Carraro sometimes get mixed together with stories about other people from the show. But there is no comparable documented criminal case, arrest, or fraud conviction involving Carraro. In fact, one of the most revealing stories about him is much more personal. Carraro's dog Pickles, a longtime companion associated with his fishing life, died in 2022 after nearly 17 years. It was one of the rare moments that gave viewers a glimpse of the person behind the captain. But even then, Carraro kept most of his private life away from the spotlight. For years, viewers knew almost nothing about Carraro's life outside the boat. The show could tell them where he fished, what he caught, and which rival he wanted to beat. But the rest of his world remained largely off camera. Then, in the first episode of season 13, Carraro casually revealed something that surprised many viewers. He referred to Jess Boardway not as his girlfriend, but as his wife. He immediately caught himself and joked that he had to stop saying girlfriend. He explained that he was newly married. The marriage had apparently already happened nearly a year earlier. Public evidence indicates that Carraro and Boardway were married on May 15, 2023, in Gloucester, Massachusetts. The strongest evidence came from Carraro's friend and fellow charter captain Robert Earl, who attended the ceremony and later posted photographs, describing himself as honored to have attended Dave Carraro and Jess Boardway's wedding. Carraro hadn't turned the wedding into a major public announcement. It only became widely noticeable because he eventually mentioned his wife on television. And this wasn't a relationship that suddenly appeared after the cameras stopped. Carraro and Boardway had been publicly linked for years, with evidence of their relationship going back to at least 2016. They also welcomed a dog named Calvin in 2020. Still, even as Carraro's television fame grew, his personal life remained remarkably difficult to piece together. There were photographs, occasional comments, and scattered references. But there was nothing like the non-stop personal coverage that follows many reality TV stars. That contrast may be the biggest clue in the entire story. National Geographic made millions of people feel as though they knew Dave Carraro. But they mostly knew the captain. They knew the competitor. They knew the man chasing the biggest fish. They didn't necessarily know the person who went home when the cameras stopped. And that brings us to the mystery of what happened after Wicked Tuna. National Geographic ended the original series after 13 seasons in 2024. The final episode aired on May 26. The network confirmed that the long-running series had concluded after more than 200 episodes. But it did not announce that Carraro had been fired, removed, or forced out. In fact, Carraro was still there. During the final season, he was still aboard FV Tuna.com, competing against other established captains. The final season even put him in a battle with former champions Paul Hebert and Bob Cook. So why did the show end? That question became even more interesting when the Boston Globe reported on August 31, 2024, that National Geographic had cancelled Wicked Tuna after 13 seasons and more than 200 episodes. The paper described the show as a ratings juggernaut. Captain Dave Marciano said it had been Nat Geo's #1 show for 13 years, both nationally and internationally. He also insisted that the ratings hadn't suddenly collapsed. In other words, the obvious explanation didn't seem to fit. According to the captains interviewed by the Globe, National Geographic hadn't given them a clear explanation for the decision. There were plenty of theories. National Geographic was part of Disney, and Disney had been going through broader corporate changes. But no reliable source established that cost-cutting was the reason the show ended. The network's official statement simply thanked the cast, fans, and Gloucester community and confirmed that the long-running series had concluded. And that timing matters. Carraro wasn't pushed out before the final season. He wasn't quietly removed after some public scandal. He wasn't replaced because of a criminal case. He was still aboard FV Tuna.com when the cameras filmed the show's final competition. Then, just like that, the television platform disappeared. And whenever a famous reality TV personality suddenly stops appearing on screen, people naturally start looking for a dramatic explanation. Maybe there was a scandal. Maybe there was a financial collapse. Maybe Carraro had been forced into retirement. Maybe there was something the cameras had never shown. But when you follow the evidence backward, the mystery begins to disappear. Dave Carraro didn't vanish after Wicked Tuna. He remained connected to the two careers that existed long before the show found him, fishing and aviation. What disappeared was the television platform that had made his private life seem public. Even the final season tells us something important. Carraro wasn't given a farewell episode because he had been disgraced. He wasn't suddenly exposed as a fraud. He was simply competing. And this time, he lost. Bob Cook of Fat Tuna won the final season championship, while Carraro finished without another title. But one loss at the end of 13 seasons doesn't erase what came before it. Carraro won 5 championships in 2012, 2014, 2016, 2017, and 2019. His 5th victory came in Season 8, when FV Tuna.com landed 19 tuna worth $120,318. He edged Tyler McLaughlin's pinwheel by less than $600. By 2020, National Fisherman was describing Carraro as the Gloucester captain with the most Wicked Tuna season titles. So the record is remarkably consistent. He wasn't a one-season wonder. He wasn't simply a television personality who learned how to act like a fisherman. He was an experienced fisherman who became a television personality. The same distinction applies to his reputation as the show's villain. Carraro really was competitive. He really did check marine conditions before heading out. He really did want to beat the other boats. But his rivals could also laugh with him, drink with him, and remain friends away from the water. Carraro explained that contradiction himself. They could joke around and have a beer, but when they got on the water, things changed. That may be the most accurate way to understand him. He wasn't a completely manufactured villain. But the television version wasn't a complete portrait either. The real Dave Carraro was a fisherman, pilot, competitor, husband, friend, and private person. He experienced victories that made him one of the most successful captains in the show's history. He experienced rivalries that became television storylines. He experienced personal losses. He watched people from the Wicked Tuna world face tragedy and controversy. And eventually, he watched the series that had made him famous come to an end. But there is no verified spectacular downfall hiding behind the disappearance. No documented criminal scandal. No confirmed forced retirement. No mysterious disappearance. No evidence that Carraro's life collapsed when Wicked Tuna ended. Instead, there was a successful fisherman who became famous because cameras followed him to sea. He won 5 championships. He competed for more than a decade. He kept most of his private life private. And when the network finally ended the show, he was still doing what he had been doing long before television arrived. Fishing. Flying. Living a life that existed before the cameras and continued after them. And perhaps that's the strangest part of the entire story. Viewers spent 13 seasons watching Dave Carraro as if they knew him. They watched him chase enormous bluefin tuna, argue with rivals, celebrate victories, and battle through exhausting days on the Atlantic. They saw the captain. They saw the competitor. They saw the character television needed. But when the cameras disappeared, Carraro didn't. Only the audience lost sight of him. After 13 seasons, 5 championships, fierce rivalries, personal losses, controversy, and years of speculation, the biggest mystery surrounding Dave Carraro turns out to have a surprisingly ordinary answer. Nothing spectacular happened to him. Wicked Tuna ended. And Dave Carraro's life continued.